Welcome to Story Scaling by podcastvideos.com, where creators share the truth behind the content, the grind, and the growth. Yo, we are back from a brief hiatus with another episode of Story Scaling. I am super pumped. I'm Bang, Jeremiah Pickett, also known as, here at podcastvideos.com. As you can see, we got some new logo action going on in the background. And for this revamping of Story Scaling, we have a special guest with us, none other than
Daniel McFadin.
Daniel McFadin. Daniel, I'm super excited to meet you. I've heard a lot of really, really cool things about, you and what you do. And so at this point, I'm going to introduce you to the listeners. I'm sure some are already familiar, but I'm going to read this bio. And when I finish reading the bio, you tell me if you approve it or if you got some things that you want to add to it. Cool?
Well, depends. Where'd you get the bio from?
I got this particular bio came from Chris.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
A mutual friend of ours. Shout out to Chris Bond out there. He laced me with some research, and so I'm going for it. At any point you need to jump in and say, hey, or add some sauce to it, let me know. All right.
Well, I can't wait to call him after this. Say, Chris, what were you doing? Where did you get those facts? Those aren't real. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, here we go. It says Daniel McFadin is a general assignment reporter with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, where he's worked since 2022. He previously covered NASCAR and motorsports for NBC Sports and Front Stretch. At the Democrat Gazette, Daniel has also been at the forefront of the newspaper's podcast efforts, including co-creating and co-hosting the Orsini Tapes, a narrative crime podcast about one of Arkansas's most complex and sensational murder cases. The series uses archival tapes and meticulous research to revisit the 1981 killing of Ron Orsini and the web of suspicion around his wife, Mary Lee Orsini.
It's all right.
Is that spot on?
That's spot on.
Okay, perfect. Man, it's from NASCAR to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette.
Yeah.
What, talk to me a little bit about, I'm newer into the world of NASCAR. I got a buddy of mine. He works here. His name is Parker. He's super into NASCAR, super into F1. So he's been, kind of introducing me into that world a little bit. Talk to me about, what you did for NASCAR, and then how do you get from there to Arkansas Democrat Gazette?
Well, I worked for NBC Sports covering, NASCAR motorsports for basically 6 years. So after, I went to grad school at Indiana for sports journalism for a year. And right out of that, I had a 6-month internship at Sporting News in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then really soon after that ended, I got a, call or email from someone asking me if I was interested in covering motorsports for NBC Sports for my first job ever. I said yes, instantly. And then I did that for 6 years because NASCAR is my favorite sport. Watched it since I was, 6. So that lasted for 6 years, and then COVID happened. And I got laid off from that job in October of 2020, and spent 2 years trying to find another job. Did freelancing stuff, hooked up with frontstretch.com, and then the Arkansas Democrat Gazette came along, and I started there in October of 2022. Like I said, doing general assignment stuff, and then in late 2023, so this is the origins of the Orsini tapes. So what in late 2023, Arkansas State Police announced they had solved a cold case murder from 1991, which was the murder of a woman named Sabrina Underwood. And so I had to go down to our morgue at the Gazette, which is where we just keep all our old clips and stuff, newspaper clips from like the 60s up through 1991, basically, to try and see if there was any clips related to this homicide. And there was one. But behind the envelope for Sabrina Underwood was an envelope that said unsolved murders, unsolved mysteries. I was like, oh, that's that's intriguing. So I took that envelope, which is it was like this thick, man. Like it had clips from the late 60s up to 1990. I want to say 3.
Wow.
And so I took that home right here at my desk, and I sorted through it. I was like, okay, basically, I was doing research to figure out, okay, which of these unsolved murders actually, wound up being solved eventually, and like sorting it by year and just to have an organized envelope. But at one point, I came across a clip from March of 1982 that talked about how the mayor of North Little Rock had posted a reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever was responsible for the murder of businessman Ron Orsini. And, I hadn't seen that name anywhere else in the clips. Had never heard of that name. And so I went onto the ADG's online archive and typed in Ron Orsini, and started with the first clip, which was from March 13th, 1981, and just went forward, clip by clip, story by story, and just got sucked into this bizarre tale surrounding Mary Lee Orsini,
Wow.
the wife of Ron Orsini, and the murder of her husband. And it was just so, with each story, more red flags were going off. Like, this woman is weird, getting all the red flags. And then I get to a story from July of that year where she gets a grand jury declined to charge her for the murder of her husband, and she decides to throw a champagne party celebrating not getting indicted. And the biggest red flag is going up. It's like, who does this?
Yeah. You should be somewhere mourning.
Yeah. And the all my alarm bells went off from a quote in the story where she said, "At least the heat's off me." I was like, excuse me?
What?
And so I get to this point where I come to the point where I get to a story about how Alice MacArthur, who is the wife of Mary Lee Orsini's lawyer, Bill MacArthur, where Alice MacArthur survives a car bombing in May of 1982, and I'm flabbergasted because
Wait a second. These are all things that have documented happened in Arkansas.
yes, no, because that's what I was thinking. A car bombing in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1982. What are you talking about? I've lived most of my life in Arkansas. Okay,
Right.
had never heard about any of this, and I'm like, what is going on? And so then I do another archive search for Alice MacArthur just so I don't miss anything. All right, I was like, okay, and unfortunately for me, when I did this search, I didn't select oldest first because so it went to the default newest first. And so the first thing I saw was a story from 1999 about the trials of the century in Arkansas. And number one with the bullet was the trial of Mary Lee Orsini for the murder of Alice MacArthur. I'm like, what in the world are we? And so I get sucked into this just unbelievable saga of Mary Lee Orsini. I read the book that Gene Lyons wrote in 1993 called The Widow's Web, and I just, Mary Lee Orsini became my obsession. And then at some point in early 2024, my colleague at the Democrat Gazette, Tony Holt, who has done true crime podcasts before, walked over to my desk and asked me, "Hey, do you want to do something about Orsini?" I was like, "Yes, please. Can we start now?" And in April of last year, me and him went down to the Pulaski County prosecutor's office. We had asked, "Hey, can we see your your files or whatever for the Mary Lee Orsini case, and so they pull in on a cart. I think it was like 3 or 4 boxes full of one box is, or actually like 2 boxes are full of just grand jury testimony transcripts, just full of it. And then there's another one with just tapes, 40-year-old audio tapes that no one has heard. That probably the only other person besides me at this point who had listened to him was Gene Lyons when he's researching his book.
Sure.
So no one has heard these tapes ever. And it's like, this is the podcast. This is it. And so, yeah, for the next year was us putting together the Orsini tapes, which is just documenting this 3-year saga. And then also, talking to people who, the few people who are still alive from then, documenting this case. Also got to talk to Alice and Bill MacArthur's children, Chuck and Robin MacArthur. They don't appear on the proper podcast, but they appear in our companion stories and, bonus episodes. And this was the first time they had ever talked on the record about how this case affected their family in 44 years. And so, yeah. It's the most important thing I've ever worked on. It's the biggest project I've ever worked on. I'm incredibly proud of it. So I'm very glad to be able to be here talking to you about it. So
yeah, man, my brain is just over here firing off. And so I literally can't fathom, how it's been for you. And we'll bounce around. I want to ask some more stuff about, NASCAR. But while we're here on this topic, what was the most surprising, shocking, mind-blowing piece of data information that you've come across during this process? Because you just spoke about it for a few minutes, and I'm just like, you know what I mean? So like, I can't imagine what it was like to actually listen to the tapes and actually read the files and, and so, yeah, like, and that might be a big question, but what's one of the things that come to your mind when you think about that?
Well, I hate that I kind of spoiled the podcast, but I kind of have to, is to tell you like how crazy.
Yeah.
But the car bombing, like, that she survived that. That's not how she was killed. Which that would happen 2 months later, July 2nd.
It was his wife that got the car bomb.
Yeah, and she would die. She would be murdered 2 months later, July 2nd, 1982. I won't spoil that. I hate, that's what I like. This was an important part of doing the podcast for me, was making sure I didn't sensationalize this, because two people died over the course of this, Ron Orsini and Alice MacArthur. And, for, 30-ish years, there were true crime, documentary style things that, just did what they had to do to get viewers for 45 minutes. And that was part of the reason that Chuck and Robin MacArthur had never talked on the record about this, because they kept getting burned by these projects that got stuff wrong just really badly and just sensationalized, and also didn't treat their mother as more than just a victim. And so that was one very important thing for me. For 2 out of the 6 episodes that we did that revolved around the death of Ron Orsini and Alice, was to play it very straight, matter-of-factly, this is what happened, and not to, make a spectacle of these people's deaths. So that was the most important thing about this project to me. Outside of that, those 2 episodes, there's not a lot of true crime projects that I'm aware of that kind of have a dark humor element to it, and this has a lot of that. There are parts of the story that are funny. So, and that's one thing that appealed to me, is like, this is tragic, horrible, but there are elements of it that are just absurd. So, but really the most sensational thing about it was the car bombing. like, because that doesn't happen in Arkansas. And there wouldn't be another major car bombing event in Arkansas for about 25 years. So, but yeah, if there's a lot in this saga. So, but no, the car bombing happening is the most just out there thing of this, really, for me.
Sure. How many episodes and how long are the episodes?
For the main body of the show, there's 6 episodes, and they range from 45 minutes to an hour. And there are bonus episodes which feature interviews with like Robin and Chuck MacArthur and other people who were connected to the case that we just didn't have time to put into the main body.
When you finish this, is there an exhale of relief? Like, man, I scratched that itch and it's over now? Or is it like, what's the next case that I can dive into and keep this thing rolling? How does that work?
Well, it was weird because, like I said, I worked on this for a year. And so when the last story was published, when the last episode was put out, there was this sense of relief, like, oh gosh, finally that's over. But then I also was like, yeah, now what? There's a come down from it, where it's like this thing that's been part of your life, and then it's just not there. Also, but you also have people saying, hey, you need to look into this Arkansas true crime case, and I had lots of that on Facebook comments of, you need to look into this. I'm like, I just spent a year with a psychopath. Let me breathe. I need time. But no, I'm right now. I'm hoping to start a new podcast series soon with the AGG related to no Siri. I didn't say anything. That's related to true crime in Arkansas. Hoping. But no, it like when you're done with the biggest, most important thing you've worked on, something you didn't expect to work on, 2 years earlier when you're writing NASCAR. It's a relief. It's weird and surreal. But no, I'm super, super proud of what Tony and I and our producer Kyle McDaniel was able to put together.
Is it more difficult to gather all the information that you need to tell a compelling story, or to figure out how to tell the story in a way? Because, there's a way that, and I looked up some of the story and clips and, excited to kind of dive into it, but there is a way that you all were able to articulate this. And like you said, weave in different themes, whether that be humor or, but do it in a tasteful way and not just put something out there just for the sake of. And so what's more difficult, gathering all of the information and sifting through the files and listening to all the tapes, or taking that information and communicating it in a way that's entertaining, that does the due diligence and, conveys the message that you want to convey?
Well, honestly, gathering everything was pretty easy, except for the month or so where I one day out of the week, I went down to the prosecutor's office and had to record all these audio tapes on my phone. So I'm spending 8 hours in a windowless room in this building, listening to these tapes and writing down what's on each tape for future reference. That was the most difficult part of this because it took so long. But really, like, all we had to do was FOIA the North Little Rock Police's case file for it, and they digitized it, sent it to us, and so you have this huge file which I printed off, and so now a good chunk of it is in this box. So
Wow.
So now you got interview transcripts from 1981 that so so we got that, then we got the Little Rock case file. And then we got Gene Lyons, who wrote Widow's Web. He had donated all of his material that he used for that book to the University of Arkansas library, their special collections. And so they had all of his audio tapes that he used to interview people back in the late 80s, early 90s. Many people who were dead. And there's no way me or Tony could have talked to. And we got those tapes.
Wow.
And again, which are tapes that only Gene Lyons has ever heard. Which, I mean, you can read the quotes in the book, but it's different when you're, hearing the person say it back in 1989 or whatever. So getting it all together was relatively simple. It was okay, how do I tell this story in a way that's compelling, that hasn't been done before? And then I didn't want to do what Gene Lyons did. I didn't want our podcast to just be the book all over again. The only time it's like that is basically like the first 10, 15 minutes of the first episode. Because we needed to get to the tapes, as quickly as possible. And so that's really the only time we ever copied what Gene Lyons did, was basically the first chapter or so of the book. But yeah, that was the hardest part, figuring out how we're going to tell this story, and do it in a way that is compelling, entertaining, but again, is also respectful to what happened and the people who were involved.
Sure. Let's go back to college real quick. So your first job out of college is working for NASCAR, your favorite sport.
No, not working for NASCAR, covering NASCAR.
Covering NASCAR.
For NBC Sports. So,
okay.
Yes, that was my first job, was covering my favorite sport for a national publication. I've always been very proud of the fact that at one point during my internship at Sporting News, one of the old-timer reporters told me, let's be honest, your first job out of here is going to be covering high school sports. I was like,
right.
It was like, bet. And I didn't cover high school sports until that hiatus between NBC Sports and the Democrat Gazette, when I was doing freelance stuff. So
yeah.
6 years I'm covering NASCAR, covering a national sport, and being good at it. So
right.
But yeah,
I feel like that in and of itself is a highlight. The fact that it's just like a student where your professor tells you, oh, you'll only go on to do this, and you do something and it's like, haha, but I'm actually doing NASCAR. And so, that in and of itself is a highlight. In that 6-year time frame, what's the moment that when you play back in your mind, your time there, you go back and you're like, man, this is the highlight right here.
Of my 6 years?
Yeah, covering NASCAR.
I mean, technically I'm still covering NASCAR, so run stretch. I don't know, covering the Daytona 500 for the first time was cool. That because that's such a big event, and that it's such a massive humanity and the spectacle of it. Technically the second race I ever covered in grad school was the Indianapolis 500.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Because that when I was at Arkansas State University, that's where I went to undergrad. That's where I found out about Indiana's sports journalism master's program, and said, "Oh, you could possibly cover the Indianapolis 500." And I mean, I found out about that my sophomore year, and so the next 3 years were dedicated to me ensuring that I got to go to that program so I could cover the Indianapolis 500.
Wow.
And I got to do that. So I did that. But yeah, just covering certain events, I've won awards for my coverage and stuff, which is cool. but there's not like one right off the top of my head. It's like, oh yeah, this was
Totally.
covered the Indian 500, covered the Daytona 500. There's great races I've covered that were fun to write about. But yeah, so I'll just go, covering the Daytona 500, covering the Indy 500. I guess
Right on. I have an increasingly growing reverence for what NASCAR drivers do, and I'm now mature enough to say that it is indeed a high intense sport.
It is.
I used to be in denial. I will admit that. For those people out there that are like, it's just driving, it's not a sport, what would you say to them? How do you explain,
Well, anybody can do a layup. Basketball. Anyone can do that.
Right.
Can you sit in a hot car for 3 hours, driving at 180 miles per hour, inches away from another person doing the same thing, without screwing up? No, you can't. To be in the NASCAR Cup Series, you have to be the best of the best. And you have to drive on super speedways where you're in a pack full of 38 cars nonstop. You have to drive on short tracks. For a 3-year period, you had to be able to race on dirt at Bristol. And now you have to go to 6 different road courses in a given year, including on the streets of Chicago this weekend.
Literally this weekend.
This weekend, they're racing in Chicago. It's for some reason, Formula One is held up as the peak of motorsports, and I don't know why. It's one form of racing, road courses, and for the most part, it's a parade. The race is usually decided on qualifying day. Who qualifies on the pole, who gets to turn 1 first, they're more than likely going to win. It's NASCAR is, you have to do everything. NASCAR is the peak of motorsports, as far as I'm concerned. So
take that, Formula One.
Yeah. And they had a movie that came out with debuted with $140 million worldwide last weekend, but whatever.
Yeah, so be it.
But yeah, if you demean what NASCAR drivers do, you have no idea what you're talking about.
My buddy told me they go so fast that by the time someone sneezes and opens their eyes, they've went 3 football fields. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, no way they're moving that fast. And then he shows me a video, and I'm like, oh, there is a way. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I've never actually asked a driver before. It's like, do you sneeze?
Can you safely sneeze in there? Like, it's crazy.
So, the stereotypical question is, oh, what do you need to do when you go to the bathroom? Well, they go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
They're wearing flame retardant suits. It's fine.
Yeah.
But no, I've never asked that. Hey, what do you do if you need to sneeze? So maybe maybe when I'm covering the Brickyard 400 later this month, maybe I'll ask some of that. What do you do if you need to sneeze?
You've had a wide-ranging journalism career, from motorsports to coverage of crime reporting. How do you find your way to the Gazette?
Just applying. Like I spent 2 years basically, unemployed except for my freelancing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had job interviews with multiple various outlets, but nothing came of it until I applied for the Gazette, and I went down to Little Rock, interviewed with editors, and then a couple days later had a phone call with the managing editor, Allison Hodge, who is actually retiring tomorrow. And then they offered me the job, and it was the first time I'd gotten that offer that was a realistic offer. And it's like, I took it. I needed the job. So, and it was, relative, it's based in Little Rock. I spent most of my life living in Northwest Arkansas. So, it's close to home. But, I did not intend to go down this path in life. I thought I was going to be, a sports journalist for all my life. But I'm actually, like I said, this is going to be the last year that I cover NASCAR for front stretch. And so I'm going to be tying a bow on that this year, which is a weird feeling to say, oh, yeah, that thing you went to grad school for, the thing you have $20,000 in debt for, you're going to be done with that. But it's just, I got kind of tired of balancing it. It's like, okay, this is the thing I do for a living. This is the kind of thing that I do on the side. And like, it's been like I write columns for front stretch, and it's just become kind of harder and harder to come up with things to really write about that I care about, when you're not plugged into the sport, every day of the week like I was when I was with NBC Sports. But like doing the like the Orsini tapes, like I had never done a narrative podcast like that before. I had done podcasts about NASCAR. I had done podcasts about movies, which is my other love. So I had never done this before, and I did a really good job. I'm good at it. And I want to do more stuff like that. And so, yeah, I'm at a weird, I guess, fork in the road, I guess, with my career at this point. But it's an interesting fork in the road. So,
an episodic back to the Orsini tapes, to do it like you did it, to structure it like you structured. Talk to me, and you spoke briefly on it, but talk to me a little bit about why you chose the route to go narrative, because you could have done, a different, more one-to-one interview type style, but you gave it an entire life and you told a story. Like, talk to me a little bit about that approach, because I think that's common, but I don't know, at least in my space, what I'm seeing, I don't know if that is as common. And I think that takes a little bit more intentionality and a little bit more attention to detail. And so talk to me about the decision to take that approach as opposed to another approach.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I don't listen to true crime podcasts. Like, I just don't. But I mean, it just, the way I took it just seemed like it was the only way really to do it. Like, it's like, here's this story. Listen to it as it unfolds and be shocked and amazed. Like, yeah. It's not, oh, I'm in here in the studio with this person. Tell me what you remember. That's boring to me. No, taking all this information, taking all my interviews, and building a story. Like, I wrote it when I was writing it. I was writing it as if I would in just any other story for the Democrat Gazette. I did my scripts differently than what Tony Holt did. Like, I went through all the tapes, found all the quotes that I wanted, that I thought were relevant, and then structured my story around those quotes. Because that just made most sense to me. Tony wrote his script and then inserted quotes. So our episodes are different, but it's like I structured one thing. I structured the series. I wanted it to structure it like a TV show.
Sure.
For one part, because that seems interesting, but also I want someone to adapt this into a TV show, and so I wanted to give them, like, here's the blueprint. So it. And like we have cliffhangers and stuff, so we try to entice people to come back and listen to the next episode. It's just, I wanted to basically you're listening to my version of a book, really. That's but also a TV show.
So. Yeah. what were there any stories that you wrestled with leaving in versus taking out, or and if you know, you can either speak to the story specifically or more so the tension of, man, what do I share, what do I not share? Like, talk to me about being in that space.
Oh no, there are so many side stories to the Mary Lee Orsini saga that make it even crazier. That we had to, cut off. Like, we had to keep it focused on pretty much Mary Lee Orsini and not a bunch of these side characters. Because there's audio tapes of interviews with people that there's interesting stuff in there, but we just don't have time. We're dealing with a case, transpired over 3 years. So you got to keep focused on the important stuff. Like I said, I hope someone makes a TV show about this so they can include the other stuff, which adds to the just absurdity and insane stuff that happened in this case. There's so much you could do about Tommy Robinson, who was the Pulaski County Sheriff at the time, who he just added to the craziness of this, and the case was made worse by him. And we cover him, in the podcast, but there was so much related to him that you could have covered, but we had to narrow it down. Like, what can we fit in 45, 60-minute episodes? And that was hard. It's like, so, but which, luckily, like, we had companion stories in the newspaper. We had 6 stories that related to each episode that, better told or supplemented the story. You don't need to read those stories, but they're there if you want to. Like, the first story was a prologue to the podcast, a prologue to the very first episode. That's the days and, weeks leading up to the murder of Ron Orsini, the night of March 11th, 1981. We have a story that's just dedicated to who Alice MacArthur was, because Alice MacArthur isn't a main character really in the events of this things. Her death and the car bombing are unfortunate things that happened to her, and she, isn't a main story in this, or main character in this. And so that the fourth companion story that goes with the 4th episode is just the recollections of Robin and Chuck MacArthur of their mother, of what she was like, what she loved, what her passions were, so that you can read that and then listen to the episode where she's, tragically killed. And so, because the way I structured that episode, which is, for me, the best episode, or also the most important episode, was a minute-by-minute, here's the thing that happened July 2nd, 1982, leading up to and then following her murder. Because it comes, and then we're moving on. We deal with, the repercussions and the aftermath, but the moment of her death is just the thing that happens, and we keep going because that's how it happened.
Wow.
And so that episode and that story that I wrote were very important to me. So people know who Alice MacArthur was. This is who was taken from the world. Didn't deserve it. Ron Orsini didn't deserve what happened to him. That was important to me. That people knew who Alice MacArthur was and knew the impact that this event had on her family for decades afterwards.
I got 2 questions that come to mind. There's one question that's like, you talk about being in the dark windowless room and having to be in there for 8 hours, getting all the research. And then you talk about, knowing what to put in versus what to put out. What would you say was the single hardest part, if there is one, about working on the Orsini tapes in general?
Like episode 4, like, which the July 2nd, 1982, it was the most, not difficult, but I had to get it right. I had to get all the information, and I had to put it together, because I'm like, the box full of transcripts, have that. I have hours of audio tape to cut up and get right. Hours and hours of transcripts on my laptop that I didn't print off. Finding all these perspectives, all these little stories from this one day in 1982, and then just structuring it in a compelling. I hate to say entertaining for this episode because of what it's about. It's just a compelling about TikTok of a story. Like, get dun 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 10 a.m. This is what happened. Noon, this person was here. This is what happened, and that was getting that episode right and making it good to listen to. That was the hardest part. That one episode, because it was a lot. I mean, there's other episodes that deal with months of time, so with lots of different stories, which, figuring out, okay, which stories from this 4-month window do we include and what we don't include, that's hard. But one day of time, the most important day, arguably, out of this whole saga, and then also writing about our fifth companion story was the fallout, how it affected Chuck and Robin MacArthur, how it affected Bill MacArthur for going years onward. That was the July 2nd, 1982, and everything after it. And just letting people know, hey, I'm sure you were, especially for people who were alive at the time and just consuming this through newspapers and TV. Oh, this was just a thing that was happening that they were engrossed by. No, this happened to people. This affected this family, and still does. Like, you still live with this. I'm not a fan of the true crime industry, because it's gross for the most part, and just sensationalistic in all the wrong ways. These are tragedies that happen to people, that it still affects them. This isn't entertainment, for them anyway. So just putting episode 4 specifically together, and doing it in a respectful way, a compelling way.
Sure.
That was the most difficult, the most important thing for me to do on this whole thing.
Totally. Oh, you talk about coming across those case files and being so engulfed in the information. What made you say 40 years later, this story has to be told this way? Like, there's a book on it, and like you were saying, but what made you say, like, I can't, because I'm sure that's not the only one that you came across. Like you were saying, there was some other stuff in there, but what made you say, like, this has to be told right now?
There's a lot in this story that kind of predates things that are going on today, like or even since then. Like, for me, like, this whole case was basically OJ before OJ. Like, if this case had existed in the early 90s instead of the early 80s, I believe it would be a nationwide story. It would have been, like, because of cable news and all of this. Now, it wouldn't, I don't think it would have reached OJ levels, because he's OJ. But this was a huge story for 3 years in Arkansas in the early 80s. And it's basically, aside from a couple of true crime 45-minute specials, and over the last 20 years, it's receded into obscurity, and it baffled me because this, like I said, there's a car bomb in it. It's like there's so much this story. The characters involved, Tommy Robinson, he was basically Donald Trump before Donald Trump. He is this very over-the-top character who cries about, law and order and all of this, and he's just a complete wild card. You have no idea what he's going to do and how, as you're reading it and listening to it, like what's going to happen, because he's just he pull the grenade and throw it into the pool. That's what Tommy Robinson is. It's there's a lot of whole like Bill MacArthur, like as he's going through all this, he's a high profile, one of the most successful criminal defense attorneys at the time. People assumed like that he was a rich aristocrat, he wears impeccable suits. He must be this kind of person, when actually, sure, he wears nice suits, has a nice house, but back in the 60s, he was a rodeo guy. Like he's a redneck. He's a country guy. Like he owned a club that was, that opened in late 1981 called, BJ's Honky Tonk. So the public assumed so much about the case and the people involved with it, and they had no idea what was actually going on at the time. There was what was happening in the newspapers, and then there was what was happening, in reality. And it's when you're reading the newspapers clips and then listening to the audio tapes of what was that people recounting what was actually happening, it's two different worlds. And the headlines in the newspapers were driven by Mary Lee Orsini for the most part, and Tommy Robinson. So they sucked the air out of the room of this story. But yeah, going back to my original point, if this case was transported to now, this would be an insane story that would be driving headlines for all the time, I think. Because I look at a lot, I'll watch a trailer for some true crime special today, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. that's nice. But you have nothing on Mary Lee Orsini. Like, so, but yeah, I like I said, I had never heard of this story when I found it, and so I wanted to tell a story for people like me. But I do think a large part of our audience was people who were alive when this happened, and so they got to really learn about what happened back then, and I thought that appealed to me too. And like Chuck and Robin MacArthur, they learned stuff from this podcast. Ron Orsini's niece, Kelly Orsini, she learned stuff from this story that she didn't know. She was 10 years old at the time. And Ron Orsini's family listened to this podcast. His daughter and listened to it with her family. And she gave me, she said we did an awesome job. So that was the most surreal. That was one of the very surreal things. Was talking to her on the phone after this and said, I'm listening to it with my daughters. I'm like, so if I had to give advice to anybody who wants to like do a true crime podcast, okay, make it as if the people who were involved and whose lives were affected are going to listen to it. keep that in mind. So, because to have the MacArthurs and the Orsinis approve of this project and what the story we told after how it affected them and their families in horrible ways over the last 40 years, that was the most validating thing I could get out of this, was their approval over how we presented this story.
For sure. That's a great takeaway. I'm gonna ask you another takeaway that you have in general for podcasters or content creators. Maybe something that you wish you knew, when you got started, whether that was when you first started with, writing, or first kind of jumping into podcast. And it could be something as simple as, what equipment to use, how to structure a story. What's that one piece of information, that one takeaway that you would share with other people that you wish you knew when you got started?
Well, I'm not the person to talk to about equipment. So I just typed it and talked into a microphone. Just be prepared for the side quest you might have to go on.
Mm-hmm.
to the story. You don't know who's going to be willing to talk and who won't be. It's be prepared for it to take up a huge chunk of your life, especially when it's something that's very in depth. But just write the story. If it's a narrative podcast, write the story that you would want to listen to, or if you're writing for a newspaper, write the story you'd want to read. Like when it comes to the lead, the first paragraph of the story, it's like, okay, what about this story would grab my attention?
Yeah,
what would want to keep me reading? And that's something I've lived by for my whole career. It's like, write what is interesting to you, because don't write for other people, except for if you're doing a true crime podcast. Write it and make it as if the people who were involved, who it affected, were listening.
Sure.
But still do it. Write the story that you would want to read or listen to.
I think that's sound advice, especially now in a time where stuff is so data driven and algorithms and like you said, attention spans are getting shorter.
Yeah.
To hear, write the story that you want to read or create the podcast that you want to listen to. I feel like that's very rich and useful, especially right now.
Yeah. I'm very glad that this wasn't, the podcast wasn't dictated by data. So,
yeah.
When that happens, you have to be sensationalistic. You have to oh, look at this. And it's not true to what if it's not true to what you made, then it's not honest, and it's not, I hate that. So, when we were doing the marketing for the podcast, it was like, okay, it was a point for me. We cannot sensationalize this. This is going to be a fact. The marketing has to be like that. Has to be like the podcast. It has to be factual and to the point, and that's it. Especially like we did teasers for the first episode, the fourth episode, and the last episode. And the teasers were basically me sitting in a chair in a dark room, straight to camera, saying, "Okay, here's what this podcast is going to be, or here's what this episode is going to be," with audio clips from the podcast, pictures that from 1981, 1982, and stuff like that. And like the first one we did, our person who's in charge of like social media said weeks later, yeah, it's still getting views. Like it's still getting it. And that I was really happy about that, because it wasn't an in your face, oh man, you guys want to see this interesting hear this interesting true crime story? Oh man, no, it was like, here's a story about Mary Lee Orsini and things that happened because of her. Yeah, keep being consistent from your story that you put, how you market it. Just make sure it's consistent. Don't do one thing with your right hand and a different thing with your left. So I hope that answered your question.
No, that did. It really did. And I got one more question.
Okay.
Outside of your work, who do you look at that's doing storytelling or podcasting that you think is excellent?
The one thing that comes to mind is I'm a huge movie buff, and over the last 2 years, I've really gotten into classic film, like 1940s, 1950s. And there's one podcast I haven't listened to every episode. She's had a lot of seasons of this, but it's called You Must Remember This, and it's just a podcast dedicated to the classic film era of basically 1930s up to the end of the century. But it's like she did a whole season. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. I'm sorry. She did a whole season dedicated to the Hollywood blacklist from the late 40s, early 50s. McCarthyism and actors and directors and producers and writers who were blacklisted because people assumed for the most part that they had been communists, and some were, but 10 years ago for like 5 minutes.
Right.
And she did episodes about people who were blacklisted, people who were part of blacklisting people. And that was just one season, but it was really, really good, and compelling. But she is I think it's like 16 seasons, and each season's dedicated to a different topic related to Hollywood. So I would check that out if you're into classic movies and stuff like that. You must remember this.
Daniel, this has been a very, 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 very impactful conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Before we get out of here, anything else that you want to plug, anything that you're working on, anything that you want to just add, you can get the final word.
Yeah, just please tell your friends to check out the Orsini tapes. It's there are bonus episodes, but 6 episodes. It's the most important thing I've ever worked on. I'm really proud of it. And I would just it ended in April, so it's been over for a few months now. But I want people to keep finding it. It takes place in the early 80s, but it's a timeless story. Let's do it. Tell your friends, and maybe it'll get enough attention that someday someone will make a TV show out of it.
I'm counting on it. I'm counting on it. Man, Daniel, thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to doing it again, my man.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me.